Yeah, that's a good idea to stop just put our
Uh-huh.
pictures up. I'm gonna do that from
Okay,
now on.
very good. I see that it's now streaming live, but okay, I'm gonna share it now.
Okay, great. And then I'm gonna share it to a few pages. Share to a page. All right. You all set?
All set.
Okay. So there's my video, and oh, it says ask to start video. So you might have to hit the. There you go.
Hmm.
All right. One person. Well, we'll start with this one person then. Hello, everybody. My name is Richard Sandilands, and this is the Zero Point Podcast. This is episode number 8, so we're moving right along. My guest today is Larry Cammarata. Larry, thanks for coming on the show. We appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
And I'm going to go ahead and read your bio, and then we'll get started.
Okay.
Larry Cammarata, PhD, is a licensed psychologist specializing in mindfulness-based psychotherapy and mind-body medicine in Asheville, North Carolina. He is also an instructor of Tai Chi and Qigong, who has received advanced training in the US and China. His work on mindful movement was presented at the 11th Annual International Scientific Conference of the Center for Mindfulness at the University of Massachusetts School of Medicine. Larry is the co-founder of Mindfulness Travels, an educational organization that provides training in mindfulness and mindful movement in beautiful, inspiring settings around the world. And yes, the website is mindfulnesstravels.com. And I'll be sure to put those links under the comments of the live stream. So, all right. Well, yes, thanks for coming on. Great to see you again. It's been maybe over a year or something since I've seen you, I think. So,
Yes, pleasure.
okay, well, I guess I want to ask about your college days and how you kind of picked the career path that you went into. And that was psychology, correct?
That's right. That's right. I
So what
entered
was
my,
what,
go
oh,
ahead.
so what was the main draw? What drew you to it? Yeah.
I think it's kind of a nuanced answer these days. In the beginning, my level of awareness was about academics and was purely an academic pursuit. In 1973, I entered my freshman year of undergraduate college. And over time, I began to make the connections as a very provocative and insightful professor of mine in graduate school once said, you can know psychology but not know people very well. And
Oh,
so over time, I began to make those connections from the conceptual, academic, scholarly realm to how to work with people, how to work with my own self, how to work with relationships. And so several years down the road into my master's degree and then on to my doctorate, I began more and more to make those connections and seeing the relevance for how to basically create mind-body health for people.
wow. So when you in the 70s, was there a psychologist that was like the popular psychologist who was really putting him out there, like Carl Jung and stuff like that? Was there any
Well,
one?
actually, I'm not that old, to
Well,
think that Carl Jung is not my contemporary. But seriously, there is another Carl, though. It's interesting you said that because
oh, okay.
Carl Rogers
Carl Rogers.
was an incredible uh, icon of humanistic psychology. And his work was very non-directive, was very empathic. And today, in the context of mindfulness-based psychotherapy, we're still talking about the great contribution that Carl Rogers has made to the field because of his way of being present to people in an empathic and caring way. What we found is that, when I say we, what researchers and clinicians have found is that it's not so much the techniques you use, it's your ability to connect with another human being in a caring, loving, compassionate way that really makes the difference. So he was a major influence and left an imprint. There are two other psychologists. One is Fritz Perls, a psychiatrist actually, who was part of Freud's inner group, and he went on to found Gestalt therapy, which is very present centered, which is very much in alignment with mindfulness based therapy, but with other emphases. Fritz Perls was another major icon, and then certainly a host of others. I'm not recalling a couple other names there, but those are
Yeah,
the
sure.
two major folks that have been influential early on in my practice.
Was psychology mainly, like that term, was it an American word, or was it over in Europe? I'm just trying to figure out when it started.
Well, you can go back to Europe, really, the science of psychology, starting, I believe, the first laboratory was in Germany, I believe, around 1948 in Leipzig, Germany. I used to teach Psych 101, so I had some of these factoids in my brain. And, from there, it became more of a science. Certainly Freud predates that date. It might actually have been 1848 now that I'm thinking about it. But,
Yeah.
those details aren't as important as, yes, the emergence from Europe and then over to North America
Yeah.
from Europe.
So, do you think from the start it was kind of more of a mental study and not really getting on a body level?
Interesting question. I would say no. I would say that, even Freud was interested in biological drives, so that
Mm.
the biology was always part of the conceptualizing of human nature, particularly around instincts and inherent human nature, and our evolutionary way of being, so to speak. But yes, true that some people went more into, let's say, the spiritual dimension, like Carl Jung, as you mentioned. Others went, deep into the body, in terms of, working with primal therapy, the instinctual. So there has been a range, really, of interest regarding body and mind, and not always so separate.
When did trauma start to become like a key word in the
Mhm.
field? Was it always talked about? Because essentially, that's psychology is really helping you deal
Mhm.
with your
Mhm.
traumas.
Well, if we go back to Sigmund Freud, a lot of his work was working with victims of sexual trauma, sexual abuse trauma, and there's been a lot written about his theory of repression and how some of his work was really denying the reality of sexual abuse trauma and was more looking into what he considered at the time fantasized trauma, which became a psychological conflict. And so during his day, trauma was certainly part of the treatment process, and others, picked up on that. Of course, working with trauma is now very much in the public consciousness.
Right.
In our contemporary practice, there are many wonderful modalities, many of them call upon the wisdom of the body, like somatic experiencing,
Right.
for example. So yes, a very, very important topic.
So when you first started to study it, um, you graduated and then you were a practicing psychologist. And then I guess at what point did you take it into the Eastern um, mind
Mm.
body arts? And
Well,
kind of what was
even
the reasoning behind that?
yeah, yeah. By the way, just as a footnote, the trajectory to be able to call yourself legally a psychologist is a long road.
Okay.
So it's 9 years of college and
Wow.
university for me,
Wow.
and then an additional year or two postdoctorate for internship training, and
Wow.
then sitting for the license. So there has to be this whole,
Wow. Almost nine
journey.
years, and then you can sit. Wow.
Right, right. Please give me your question again.
Um, how how did you bridge that into the mindful movement?
Eastern. Yeah, I mean, going back to your original question, I recall you're asking about the Eastern connection, and I will say
Yeah.
this: I became interested in Zen as an undergraduate. I would say right around 1974, 1975. I took a course in humanistic psychology, and it connected me. I took an independent study within that particular course, and it connected me to Zen teachings, and I fell in love with the poetry, with the ideas of Zen, but not as much as the practice, which is really where it's at. So those seeds were
Mm.
planted fairly early on, but really not until I entered into the academic arena in the early 70s. So fast forward that to, I would say now, a little bit more than 30 years ago, I began a study of Tai Chi, the Chinese martial and meditative movement art of Tai Chi Chuan. And that, of course, connected me in a body centered way to
Right.
Eastern philosophy. And even before that, I was interested in Buddhism and continue with Buddhist studies today.
Yeah. I'm just kind of like feeling the relationship between psychology and Tai Chi, and was the lower Dantian talked about or thought about in psychology at all? I guess I just have this idea that it was just all it's all a mental thing.
No, 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 no. That might be regarded as a far-fetched concept by many people.
Uh,
And it's an energetic center for those who aren't familiar with it. It's thought to reside about 2 inches beneath the navel. I find another conceptual bridge to be easier for most people to access, and that is our body's physical center. For most, my understanding is that for most people who were born female, the body's physical center resides above the navel. And for most people who were born male, the body's physical center resides, I'm sorry, for men
yeah.
below the navel and for women above the navel. Yeah.
Okay.
So working with that, it's very correlated with the Tai Chi idea of Dantian energetic center.
Yeah. Um, were you also studying yoga at that time? Like, did you get involved in yoga and start to practice that as well, or was that not so much calling to you?
No, that just wasn't part of my practice. That came later
Interesting.
when I met my wife, when we were dating, because she's a
Yeah.
yoga teacher as well. And that was, still a bit over 25 years ago, I began to practice yoga.
It's just that. So I wonder if we can just go into the differences and benefits between the two. Because I know that in our culture, yoga is much more popular now.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, do you think, I'm sure there are some similar benefits,
Definitely
but they
similar
are different.
benefits.
Yeah.
They are different. I feel more connected, of course, to my own Tai Chi and Qigong practices. So to make a comparison sometimes doesn't give our friends in the yoga camp a fair nod. I will say focusing on right now some of the similarities. Of course, the body awareness and the opening to the sensations of within the body can be similar. Certainly, the breath awareness and working with the breath can be similar, different techniques, different methodologies. But those two aspects, body awareness, breath, and balance, you might call them the three B's, the similarities that those practices have. In my own experience, because yes, I have been and continue to be a yoga practitioner, I find yoga often, not always, to emphasize more of the strenuous physical way of working the body. That's not true to my yoga friends out there who practice a softer style, a slow style, a subtle style. Certainly, there can be very gentle and Tai Chi-like forms of yoga. But I will say, in my own practice, because I practice a very soft style of Tai Chi often, I incline towards a more rigorous, intensive yoga practice.
Oh, interesting.
Like many Americans, I do realize there's more to yoga than the physical, but often I've used yoga for the physical, certainly for the mind in terms of cultivating concentration and breath, but also for the physical stretching and balancing.
Yeah, the posturing of it,
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah.
So there seems to be, and this just could be my idea of it, but finding a teacher to learn a martial art from. And I don't know if Tai Chi is considered a martial art. It,
It is considered a
it is.
martial art. The foundation is martial art, absolutely.
So was that a big deal for you, like who your teacher was, and did you seek out one, or did it kind of just happen to come to you?
Yeah, it was interestingly, my first teacher was this scrappy white street fighter from Boston who had gone the route of Okinawan karate and kung fu as well, Chinese kung fu. And then in his later years, he studied Tai Chi. And he was my first introduction. And, he was impressive because he had the martial arts background and he sort of conveyed the idea that Tai Chi is a very powerful martial art as well. And so that was my first taste. But after that, I had also studied with a wonderful Taoist sanctuary in San Diego, my former place of residence. And that connected me to some very well grounded Chinese masters. And then
Lineage.
yeah, yeah. And then ultimately, I found the last teacher that I've studied with. His name is Jesse Tao, Tsao, who's a Chinese master. And what impressed me about him is that he was able to demonstrate with weapons all five major styles of Tai Chi,
Oh,
what we
wow.
call family stylists. So he was like, for me, a kinesthetic genius. He could learn 42 movements in sequence in a day or two and demonstrate them to us. So I was very impressed with his knowledge. And
Yeah,
just a little side story about how I met Jesse. We
sure.
became friends over the years, and I was actually playing music. I was playing the Native American flute for his demonstration of Tai Chi at a wellness.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
And so I was impressed with his demonstration of Tai Chi. And, I had been without a teacher for several years, and my Tai Chi practice had just kind of plateaued. It wasn't going anywhere in terms of deepening me. And so I called him up. I said, I don't know if you remember me, but I was the fellow who played the flute to your Tai Chi demonstration. And he said, I do remember you, and your flute playing tells me that you understand Tai Chi.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And
It gave you
so
chills, didn't it?
he just he just had me with that comment, and thus
Seafood
began
from now on.
thus began a wonderful study teacher-student relationship and also a friendship now. And I
Yeah.
accompanied him to China as well with a group
Yeah.
as well on a Tai Chi tour in China.
So I actually, so I'm Facebook friends with Master Jesse, and I reached out to him one time and I asked him about, how, like the process of just finding a teacher,
Yes,
and it was a very small answer. He just goes, a teacher isn't anyone special, you
that's
know?
wonderful.
Yeah, yeah. So I
I
don't
think
know.
a good teacher is, in my opinion, someone who doesn't think they're anyone special. You
Yeah,
know?
yeah. I think very humbling. Yeah. So now, of course, I want him to be my teacher.
Of course, of course.
um, all right. So the the weaponry, because Tai Chi is not a violent um, art by nature. What's the reasoning for using the weapons when it's just to have it be a mindful body practice? Because it doesn't seem like they're practicing to be able to do like a self defense.
Well, this is there's truth in what you're saying, and at the same time, if you trace the roots of Tai Chi, let's go 350 years ago or more, it is to protect the village. It is
Okay.
to defend. It is to potentially,
Take a
uh,
threat out. Yeah.
strike someone or to evade their movement of aggression against you. But more realistically, in modern day, in the day of guns and such, when we use weapons like a sword, which is the one weapon that I've been trained on. It's more about how to refine your connection to the energy and your body and the environment so that the sword, for example, becomes an extension
Extension. Yeah.
of your body. And so it's an art form. Now, there are people who train solely or primarily for the martial arts aspect of Tai Chi. And what many people don't realize in the general public, at any rate, is that Tai Chi is an extremely fast martial art when it's practiced as a self defense method.
Oh, I see.
Hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So the weapons, it makes me think of a very fun aspect of the classes that I've had with you is when you do the animals. Is it
Oh,
called the
yes.
five animal frolic? Is that what it's called?
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
So why is that fun? People's energy seems to just kind
Yeah.
of, they're
Yeah.
embodying an animal, and it just seems to like become more fun at that point.
Absolutely. In Tai Chi culture and Qigong too, we say let's play. We don't say let's
Oh,
do.
yeah.
And if you think about who's studying these kinds of forms, usually it's not anybody before the age of 30 or certainly 20. It's usually people 30, 40, 50, 60 plus. And to be like a child is so inherently healing.
Yeah.
Be playful is so freeing and so liberating of the mind and body and heart and spirit, and so the animals connect you in that kind of way. um, but there is a tie-in, of course, also to kung fu with the animals, because
Mm.
each of those animals represent a self-defense maneuver as well.
Wow. Um, so you have been to China, correct?
Two times, yeah.
Um, just because I just like have this idea that the people who are the masters or just like older people who have been practicing for a while, they
Hmm.
get up in the morning and they go to like a plaza,
Hmm.
and it just seems like there's no place for that to happen in the United States. It seems like you have to go to like a studio or something. But that whole thing of just like having a community and
Yes.
people get up and go and practice Tai Chi, and then the young people can watch, and then kind of
Yes.
learn from watching. And man, I just wish that was around in the United States. Did you
I
experience
agree.
that?
Yeah, one of the great joys, especially being in China with my teacher, who's a Chinese individual, speaks the language. we were able to go to the parks most every morning and see so many people doing all kinds of practices, not just Tai Chi, but
Mm.
hula hooping and dancing and all kinds of fun things, that connected people to their spirit, to their joy, to their
Yeah.
bodies. And my understanding is that in China, age 50, there's compulsory retirement unless you have, a special position that is, needed for the society. And so consequently, many people who are 50 plus are frequenting these parks, and I liken them to our
Yeah.
gyms here in the
Yeah.
US. Instead of going to a gym, you go to a park and you do these wonderful things, and you also benefit from the social connection.
Yeah. Well,
That's
because
part of the
we're
process.
missing that. It seems like we're
Exactly.
missing because you have to like schedule something and go to something, and you have to pay to get in and all that.
Right.
Where
That's
so
right.
yeah.
Yeah. Very much, very, very valuable, without a doubt. Without a doubt. Yeah.
So I have a big question about channeling emotions with Tai Chi and Qigong
Hmm.
because I don't know a bunch of people that don't have anger as a thing that they have to deal with.
Hmm.
Um, it, how have you dealt with uncomfortable emotions through doing Tai Chi? Is it more about just letting it go, or can you actually channel it into like a positive action rather than like lashing out in violence, that type of thing?
Hmm.
I don't know if that's
Yeah. No, no, that's good. I mean, two words or three ideas come to my mind pretty
oh
immediately in terms of drawing upon what Tai Chi has taught me. One word is rooting or grounding. The idea that if we are connected, like a tree would have roots that go deep into the earth, if we are connected to our environment, if we are connected to our body, then in a conscious way, because we're always connected. The issue is, are we conscious of that connection? Then we can move from being reactive in our emotional energy, like anger or
yeah
aggression, to a place of being more responsive, to a place of being more choice oriented. The other word that comes to mind, which has been a great lesson for me, is the word soft
mm,
and softening. That
yeah
is to say, when emotions are trapped in the body, or if we're holding on to anger, my guess is that the musculature is going to tense up, going to constrict. Some people feel it in their throats, some people in their chests, in their bellies. But one of the great learnings, I think, of Tai Chi is that soft can overcome that hard constriction that is not really supporting our health. So how can we soften? That doesn't mean being a pushover, because the common visual metaphor is that if you've ever been slammed by an ocean wave, you know that the water is soft, but you also know that that water is very, very powerful. And so in my teaching and in my own, personal practice and dealing with my own emotions, how can I stay connected to my body and breath, my environment, and also soften while being mindful of what's going on so that I don't get swept away by the emotional energy, you
yeah
know, not being over controlled, mind you, but in a sense, riding that energy like you're suggesting, transforming it so that it mobilizes you.
yeah
The word emotion, energy in motion is
oh,
so
never thought of it
relevant
like
to
that.
how to be in that zone without burning up from something like anger, you know.
yeah yeah well yeah I'm just trying to kind of relate it to our current climate.
Yeah.
And obviously there's a lot of fear
Mhm.
going on now.
Yeah.
um, and yeah, how do you deal with fear? Is it also kind of have to do with rooting and softening?
Well, yeah, I mean, the ancient poet Hafiz says, fear is the cheapest room in the house. I like to
Fear is
see
the
you.
cheapest room in the house.
I like to see you in better accommodations.
Oh.
But let me just add another dimension to that, because what I'm seeing right now is that fear is somehow being denigrated right now. And I don't think that's I don't think that's healthy. You know,
What do you mean by
I,
denigrated?
in other words, people are talking about, you're wearing a mask, let's say. I don't want to necessarily go down this path too far with you, but, because you're afraid, you know, as opposed to just making a choice based on weighing the evidence and, not stuck in fear.
Oh
So
yeah,
there's a popular meme around, let go of fear, don't live by fear. And I like a more nuanced approach to emotion in general and fear in particular. And that is to say, don't deny your fear. Because if you deny your fear and think you have to be heroic by not feeling your fear, guess what? That fear will live on, or you'll maybe project it out and see it on in other people.
right.
So fear, if you think about fear, evolutionarily, fear has helped the human species to survive. We needed to fear predators and dangerous tribes to know to move away from certain things. Now, hopefully, we don't live like that. So, yes, there is
Yeah,
such a thing as psychological fear that is unfounded, that is neurotic, if you will, that is distorted. We don't want to indulge that aspect. But
right.
at the same time, regardless of where it's coming from, if we experience fear, we want to be present to that so that we can feel it and look into it, inquire into it.
Yeah,
And ultimately, either let it go or allow it to let go of you when you see what fear is created by, the conditions that create fear.
wow. Yeah, I never thought of having it let go of you. That's
Yeah,
pretty
yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, because when you allow feelings to let go of you, to me, it means you're not wrestling with them. You're
Yeah,
not pushing them in the shadows. You are moving into them and saying, okay, fear is here, anger is here, sadness is here, grief is here. Let me breathe with it. Let me be with it. Let me allow the energy to move through me instead of being trapped inside of me.
yes. Do you think that there is value in kind of communicating with the emotion and maybe recognizing that is an intelligence of some sort? It's not just like some stupid emotion that you need to get
Mm,
rid of. Like
mm.
it may actually be trying to tell you something that can help you move forward.
Yes, I think that's certainly a possibility. But I will say that it's not a black and white formula because, we see this in the popular consciousness, in the social media memes, that this feeling inside your body means this. And I don't attach myself to those kinds of formulations because I think human beings are much more complicated than that.
Yeah.
So I think we just have to be cautious around projecting on our emotions a certain kind of meaning. Like for example, here's a popular meme, somewhat tangentially related to what we're talking about. The meme that everything happens for a reason. And so I once mused with that, and I said, the way I expressed it was, everything does not happen for a reason. Things happen, and then the mental machinations of the mind create a story of meaning about what happens. And then we say, wow, that's why it happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the reason why it happened. So the mind is tricky, very, very tricky.
Yes.
And I like keeping the frame open so that we don't attach ourselves to our favorite theories and beliefs and hopefully have a little bit more freedom in that. Now, that's
Yes.
not to say to be so free form that you don't take a stand for anything. I think
Yes.
what we can orient towards is our basic values and intentions.
So I guess to bring up mindfulness, when did mindfulness kind of become a term in psychology culture? Was it from right off the bat, or has it just been kind of recently that that term has been used?
When I first studied meditation in the 70s, I don't recall ever encountering the term mindfulness. And then, I would say roughly about 30 years ago, I encountered the term mindfulness more or less 30 years ago or so through the work of John Kabat-Zinn at the University of Massachusetts Medical Center. And from there, of course, there are so many teachers, secular and Buddhist, teaching mindfulness in the context of a spiritual program, Buddhist psychology, and also science and neuroscience. And so certainly in the last 20 to 25 years, it's become very popular and popularized.
Yeah. So I don't know if we can just get like a basic definition of what mindfulness is, but then I wanted to relate it to how you were saying the mind is tricky, and that's kind of the thing that can keep us out of presence, and like
Yes,
that can keep us out of our connection to our body.
right, right. Yeah, I use several definitions of mindfulness,
Yeah.
going from the contemporary to what people often think mindfulness is, to the ancient framing of mindfulness. So many contemporary practitioners, teachers, and science-oriented people are using definitions such as John Kabat-Zinn's definition, very useful, paying attention on purpose, in the present, and without judgment. So that's one definition. Another definition from my friend Ron Siegel and his colleagues, I think Christopher Germer, Harvard psychologist, formulated this. Awareness of present-centered experience with acceptance.
Mm.
And so unpacking that more contemporary popular definition, which is very useful for our practice, it has to do with intentionally paying attention in the present moment, but not just about the mind, also about the heart. And that's the acceptance piece. Accepting reality on reality's terms. It's a very useful definition. But if you trace the roots of mindfulness to the ancient word sati, S-A-T-I, which is a Pali term, the language we think of the Buddha's time, 2,600 years ago, the word has to do with remembering. Remembering. Not about bare focused attention, but rather remembering our intentions, remembering our aspirations, remembering instructions for essentially waking up to reality. So I like combining both of those definitions, not making any one better than the other, integrating them, because we want to remember to focus our mind on the present moment with acceptance. And yet we also want to remember some of the wonderful teachings from Buddhist psychology revolving around, skillful effort, skillful concentration, skillful speech, for example.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So during like when you're meditating or just when you're being mindful, is there a way to discern like a thought that came from your heart and a thought that came from your mind by maybe the way it feels or something? I'm just thinking like,
yeah,
how do you know if this is a thought that's like it's just a mental construct, or this is actually like a real present moment thing that I just got?
yeah, the words or the ideas of coming from the head versus the heart,
Yeah.
which your question suggests, come to my mind. And for me, one way I discern that in reflecting on that wonderful question is, how reflexive and habitual am I being? There's a part of me, let's say, that likes to make jokes. Not that there's anything wrong with that. And if I'm in a situation, social situation, and I'm just, reflexively, habitually joking around, being light, that can be wonderful, sure, great party banter. But it's not necessarily coming from my heart, And so the complement of that, quote, cleverness is how to be vulnerable. How can we be vulnerable? I had the wonderful pleasure, my wife and I entertained in a socially distant way a wonderful man who is quite a spiritual fellow. We met him for the very first time, introduced by a common friend, and
Oh, wow.
he had a knack of just really speaking from his heart, and you could feel that, and when we connect with people like that, then I think we are more likely to feel that resonance and also
Sure.
connect from the heart in that way. So for me, it's about, how double thinking or reflexive or habitual am I versus can I really drop into even my belly, that place of softness. If I could feel that softness in my belly, chances are my heart can be a little bit more tender as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good um, concept to meditate on. And just what's coming to my mind is, like if I'm being mindful and just kind of being in my body,
Hmm.
I can kind of feel a directionality of the energy. So if like a judgmental or fear-based thought, it does actually kind of feel like it's a top-down type of feeling.
Hmm.
And if I have like kind of a grateful, if I remember something that I'm grateful for, I
Yeah.
actually feel it coming from like my core, like a
Yes.
warm energy that comes from my core. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, I don't know if you could relate to that at all.
I can relate to that. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
So I guess this is kind of a vague question, but so how can we use things like Tai Chi and mindfulness to empower ourselves?
Hmm. Hmm. Wonderful. Yeah, first of all, you don't need to practice Tai Chi to benefit from some of the lessons from Tai Chi, although it helps. Um, the word that comes to my mind is harmonizing, not harmony, but harmonizing. The idea that any potential obstacle that we encounter, whether that be internal in the form of an emotion or a thought, or external, for example, in the face of a challenging individual, let's say, there's a potential to harmonize in a way that we don't allow ourselves to get caught up in the reactive emotional energy. So that requires, of course, to be connected with our minds and connected to the body so that we can, once again, at the risk of sounding redundant, we can soften to that energy. We can connect in a way so that we feel stable, whether we're seated in a chair or standing up on the floor or ground. So connecting to the body, the wisdom of the
Yeah,
body is there to assist us to harmonize. So harmonizing suggests a dynamic, it's not harmony like a stone Buddha, we might say, but rather moving in and out of that balance, which
yeah,
reminds me of a story, maybe you've heard it before, a story from the founder of Aikido, who about 100 years ago, Ueshiba, Master Morihei Ueshiba, he was the founder of Aikido, and he was the most prominent martial artist in all of Japan. That's a pretty high rank.
yeah. Wow.
And, if you consider Japanese martial arts to be very, very powerful. And his disciples asked him, Master, tell us, oh great master, how is it that you never leave your center? And his response was, it's not that I never leave my center, it's that I am quick to return to my center before my opponent ever notices that I have left it.
Wow. Wow.
And
Yeah.
that is the practice. That is the practice of being mindful, being in your body, knowing. Mindfulness is also about knowing when you're off balance
Yeah.
so that you can move into balance. So, in a practical way, for those who might be listening in, what are you doing with your mind? Are you indulging fantasies of aggression? What are you doing with your breath? Are you constricting your breath? Or can you soften it? What are you doing with your shoulders? Are they hunched up out of fear or aggression? Can you lower them? Can you soften your body and stay connected as well and still feel a sense of uprightness, stability, and confidence? Not confidence as in bravado, but confidence as in being true to your own values.
Yeah. I love that idea of returning to your center,
Yeah,
because I know sometimes I'll just be kind of like lost in, where's my mind going, or what's next on the agenda or something. But you could always just be thinking, what am I doing now? Oh, I'm returning to my center right now.
that's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
that's
Returning. In
great.
fact, that's one of the wonderful, pithy instructions that I often give my students, my mindfulness students. The number one instruction is returning,
Yeah,
returning to the body and breath.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think you might get excited about this, but I want to explore this mindfulness travels business because it sounds pretty fun. Um, could you tell the story and kind of how the idea came and how it got started and kind of where you're at with that now?
Yeah, well, let me just say that I bow to my wonderful wife, Linda Cammarata, who was the brainchild of Mindfulness
Hmm.
Travels. About 7 or 8 years ago, we were revisioning our life. We moved from Southern California about 12 years ago, and we were looking at how to bring what we are interested in to the public in a way that makes a difference.
Yeah.
And so we had been involved in teaching for other people in different places around the world, like Mexico and Bali, for example. And long story short, we decided through Linda's good idea to create our own educational organization, is what we call it. We don't really think of it as a business.
Ah,
We consider it really about a kind of a movable community.
yeah.
And we've developed so many friends around the world and friends who come along with us now, even 8 times to various places around the world.
Wow.
So, what we do is we provide mindfulness and mindful movement based education to health professionals and the general public for those who are interested in those pursuits. And we do it in such a way that is not about just staying stuck in a classroom.
Mm.
Yes, there is time to learn, to move our bodies, and to also integrate the principles that we discuss and we experience with the staff that is around us in these wonderful locations and also the local people. So we go on excursions into cultural sites and also nature oriented
Yeah, it
excursions.
sounds really fun. Yeah.
Very, very important to us. So
Mhm.
that's what we've been doing in the last 7 or 8 years. And of course, with the pandemic, we came back from Costa Rica, where we led 2 retreats in early 2020. We came back to the States on March 1st, and we wiped the slate clean for the remainder of 2020. We had several other retreats planned in different
Wow.
locations in Europe. And now we're looking at 2021 and 2022 to return to our retreating if reality will support that.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, I hope so.
Yeah,
Uh, who knows what's going to happen next? But
exactly.
so,
Exactly.
I guess I want to ask you a question about the current state, but how are you dealing with how life has changed?
Hmm.
And do you feel like there's any actions that us as individuals can take to maybe get back to a more, just like a free flowing environment that we used to live in?
Right. Well, I think relinquishing the idea of getting back to the way it was, for me, is a good idea.
See? Mhm.
In the sense of that's a wanting and that's in the future. And right now, it's a fantasy.
Yeah.
But at the same time, recognizing what's really important as a human being. I was actually facilitating a Zoom meeting earlier today with a group of mindfulness practitioners. And it's very, very apparent that one of the things that we all appreciate about a meeting like this is the connection. Human beings, as you know, are social animals, and we
Yeah.
need that connection. So, connecting in ways that are safe and meaningful, and not just texting our friends, or family members who might be far removed from us in terms of miles, but to have some kind of video chat or a socially distanced, I would rather call it physically distanced, or lately I've been playing with the term socially spacious
Socially
connection.
spacious. Yeah.
Yeah, so that we can feed that need in us and feel the support of other people, which is so important for our mental and physical health
Yeah.
as well. But we have to watch those ideas about the future, I don't even call it the new normal because that's another concept that we apply to it. I think, as the famous Zen saying goes, this is it. This is it. Nothing else. This is it.
Hmm.
So, and tomorrow that will be that. But right now, this is it. And we just don't know what the future is going to be. So, the practice for me is how can I accept what this is while making the best of it, really? So, it's not a hopeless
Yeah,
situation or a surrendering as in defeat, but rather admitting this is the reality. And I realize everybody has their own version of
sure.
reality.
Well, yeah, it's funny you said hopeless because I actually skipped over this, but earlier when we were talking about anger and just uncomfortable emotions,
Yes,
I just kind of noticed a pointlessness type of feeling, like what's the point of the whole thing? Um,
yes.
and maybe that's just another thing that is out of the present moment, that feeling
Mhm.
is just me trying to give a purpose to something that's in the future. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, it's understandable to feel frustrated, and sometimes that frustration can sort of lead to anger. And it's not about making anger or frustration the enemy, of course, but let it move you so that ultimately you release it or it releases you, as we were talking about earlier.
yeah. Well, let's see here. So the mindfulness travels. Do you have anything that's like what are your? It's pretty nice because you guys can just pick where you want to go for the most
That's
part.
what
I
we
mean, if
do.
this would get over. So what's
Yes.
on the horizon for that?
Well, on the horizon, if reality
The
aligns.
distant horizon. Yeah.
Yeah, we're looking at May 2021 to return to my ancestral homeland, the place where my grandparents came from, which is Sicily, the Italian island of Sicily. And also we have a June 2021 retreat scheduled for northern Spain, a wonderful biosphere reserve in the province of Asturias, Spain. Many tourists don't go to this province. It was actually settled by Celts, the Celtic
Okay.
people.
Yeah.
And it's a very special place, deep, deep nature. And then, beyond that, we're looking at a Greek island and also returning to Assisi, Italy, which has been so very special for us over the years, and another retreat center in the south of France as well. So that's what's
Yeah.
on the horizon for us if things go as planned.
Yeah. Um, do you try to get everyone to stay like in the same area, or is it like Airbnb
Oh, no,
situation?
no,
Or
no, no, no. Some of our accommodations, for example, in Assisi, Italy, our group is staying in a 14th century modernized medieval hotel. So these are the accommodations that we provide for our people. They're
okay.
very comfortable, they're very much supportive of the retreat experience, immersion in nature. For example, in Costa Rica, we stay at a wonderful eco lodge overlooking the Pacific Ocean. So all of the places we visit, we retreat into, support the work that we're doing. Now,
It's
after the retreat, then my wife and I may indeed go into an Airbnb accommodation just to live our life because that's the way we've been doing it for the past
yeah,
6 years or so.
yeah.
Yeah.
When you're doing the teaching, is you guys have a conference room or something that you're in, or where
Yeah,
does
every facility is different. We have large rooms that we work with. We usually don't go to standard retreat centers. We go to very unique places like this castle I was
right?
talking about,
Yeah.
or like an eco lodge whereby the entire open air dining room gets transformed for a week by our group as a meeting educational space.
Wow.
We take over the whole lodge in that particular retreat. So yeah, we like to go to places that work with our group's needs so that that can be supportive for the experience on a lot of different levels, including food
Right.
and nature, for example. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. The food is very important.
it is very
Definitely.
important, without a doubt.
So do you have any advice for young entrepreneurs, someone who's trying to get their own business going and maybe doesn't see how they can get it going.
Yes,
Um,
yes,
yeah, because you've worked for yourself for a long time. It's not just the mindfulness thing was your first business or your first thing where you work for yourself.
right.
Your psychology was also you just working for yourself.
Well, actually, I was for 20 years in a medical corporation, you know.
Oh, okay.
Um, and, because I'm an independently licensed person in some respects, yes, working for myself, but I was with a very big team at that time. And since 2012, more, or 2008, I should say, more independent. So, yeah, and learned some things along those lines. But to go back to your question, in terms of entrepreneurship, to think about in terms of people instead of success, to think about in terms of forming connections instead of making money, to think about community instead of this being about you. How can you be of service is so very, very important. And getting real clear about that, because often we get swept up into very powerful dreams, and that dream doesn't have any legs underneath it. So we have to understand, what do we have to contribute, and what do we have to contribute in a way that will make a difference in a positive way to people's lives? And how can I connect with community and with mentors, speaking specifically to a younger entrepreneur? How can I connect with someone who has been there for some years and who has some wisdom, maybe, or experience to impart, so that I can feel a sense of support and maybe inspiration as
Yeah.
well?
Yeah, it's really about the energy that's behind the person. Because
Yeah,
I agree with you. You can tell when someone is just trying to make a profit, and it's
right.
people don't want to get involved with that so much. But yeah,
Absolutely.
when you make it about connection, yeah, I just don't think of that word very often. But yeah,
Yeah.
connection and community and
Yes.
service to others for sure. That energy is just so much more
Yeah.
sustainable. Yeah.
Yeah, earlier I used the term, McMindfulness to sort of define or describe the diminishment of mindfulness practice. And what makes mindfulness more valuable is its ethical and moral foundation. How to be, basically, how to be of service to other people, how to help people relieve their own suffering and stress, and to find joy in their lives.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's great. So I'll definitely put some links on the live stream so people will see. But just to wrap up here, is there anything else you'd like to share?
I don't have anything in mind right now. Off the top of my head, I would say just simply to remember to return to your body and breath if you ever experience stress or reactivity during these times or any times, to know that inside of you is the potential for peace.
Yeah. The next time someone asks me that question, what are you doing? I'm going to say I'm returning to center.
I love it. I love
Yeah.
it.
Well, it's been great talking to you, and yeah, it's always great to talk to you. So I really appreciate you coming on, and
Same here.
hope we can do
Thank,
this again. Yeah.
thank you very much.
All right.
Have a
See
wonderful
you
day.
later.
Bye bye.
Bye, everybody.